There you go.
There we are.
Excellent.
Down.
Perfect. Well, I'm so excited to get into this conversation. So let's just kind of jump into it.
I would love to have you kind of talk about how you got into law and like your background and how you got to where you're at now.
Sure. You got 3 hours for this story?
Oh yeah, I'm ready for it.
Yeah. So, my journey into law was really a fluke. I mean, it wasn't some well-executed plan. I know people have this tendency to believe that, a professional, especially going into a professional program, it's got to be well executed and well planned. Absolutely not. And I'm a perfect example of this. So, basically in undergrad, I wanted to be a finance guy. I wanted to be a Wall Street guy. I loved wearing the suit and the idea of building wealth and working with entrepreneurs. And anecdotally, that aspect of my interest never changed. So I always wanted to work with entrepreneurs. I still work with entrepreneurs. But going to business school during undergrad, I don't know, I was very free-flowing. Like I loved just working for myself. I loved the idea of working for yourself and building a brand.
Yeah.
So, I interned at Merrill Lynch. I interned in different places. I was kind of in my exploratory phase. I lived overseas for a year. I came back, was doing consulting work, and I knew I wanted to get a graduate degree. And then I started thinking, why do I want a graduate degree? Like, what leverage does that give me to do my own thing? And I said, you know what? I would love to be more of an academic. I'm kind of at the time I had just finished playing in a punk rock band, believe it or not. And so I was a very free, yeah. That guitar in the background is actually not decor. It's actually, I take it down and play it. I've got about 5 or 6. So anyway, yeah, it's just my personality was not like the buttoned up style. It was more of a creative type of person, maybe more right brain, as they say.
Yeah.
So anyway, I got this weird idea in my mind. I said, listen, if I go to law school, I can graduate with a license to practice something.
Yeah.
And I may never ultimately practice, but at least I've got this license and I can go and do whatever the heck I want. And that literally, so I just happened to be in the time zone of applying to law school. And I applied, I took the LSAT, like I got 4 books. I still remember the Princeton Review, the Games Bible or whatever, and just 2 or 3 books, a couple practice exams. I just bit down and took it. I had a good GPA at the time. And, I got in. I got ASU was my first choice, ASU Law. It's a much better school now than it was when I graduated. I don't know that I would get in now. It's so competitive.
Really? That's so crazy. You just went to law school kind of on like a whim.
It was 100% a whim.
That is so crazy.
It was literally like you're trying to figure out, you're at the airport and you're trying to figure out which shuttle to get on to get to the next, like to international connecting. I'm just going to get on this shuttle, see where it goes, and just get on the shuttle and you end up going to where you want to go. It was totally random, not planned. Now, everything after that, I definitely did in a more more planned fashion. Some of it was serendipitous, but law school, going to law school was 100% a whim for me.
So crazy.
Yeah, and then just becoming a lawyer, and that process was just totally different than what I would have expected, right? And I may have mentioned this to you before, but my first year, I interned at the Attorney General's office in Arizona. My second year, I worked at a big law firm, and I'm kind of like, I don't know that I want to do this.
Yeah.
And but I loved the idea of counseling an entrepreneur. And anecdotally, I took this clinical program, which is a hands-on. It's not like a classroom type of class. They teach you how to practice law and how to represent startups. So I took this clinic, and I learned probably like 3 or 4 things really well, learned some knowledge on how to practice. And I took that as kind of my crash course into opening my own law firm. So the second that I got admitted to practice law, I know it's really good. In hindsight, it's really crazy. The second I got licensed, I just started my own law firm. And anecdotally for you, Sam, you might find this interesting. For 8.5 years now, I've been an adjunct teaching that same clinic because I believe in it that much. And my students who will hear this know that I'm always a big believer in, mentorship and building skill early on.
Yes.
Right. And this is the vehicle through which you can start that process. And I see it in my students. They're eager to get out and practice law, but they're like, dude, I didn't know it was all textbook before this. Now I'm actually drafting. I'm sitting with clients. So yeah, that's how it started. That was, 10 plus years ago. And yes, 2010. And I just remember my schedule was like 30 hours of marketing time. So that was online marketing, which wasn't really a hot thing, 2010.
This is per week, right? So 30 hours per week you're spending on marketing alone.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I include, research into, organizations, networking, asking people to meet me for lunch or coffee, and calling people that I knew who were close friends and family to tell them, hey, guess who just got licensed to practice law and started his own firm. 30 hours was doing the work. Right. And I don't know a lot. So I'm really hitting the books again, right? Talking to mentors.
Yeah. So you're at 60 hours, right?
60
at
hours.
This point. Okay, we're at 60 hours per week working. The marketing and then doing the actual work.
Yeah. And then I think there was probably another, 15 to 20 hours that just went into like just strategic planning and managing, trying to figure things out. So, those are pretty hardcore work hours. But the thing is, I had the sense of pride that I'm doing this for myself. I'm not doing it for some guy in a gigantic office space with this feet on his desk or gal. I'm doing it for me, doing it for my own.
Yes.
It's a total difference. And that's where, as an entrepreneur, that blood starts to flow through your veins, right? You start thinking about, how do I build my customer base? How do I, generate more revenue? How do I make sure that I don't get sued because I'm a professional? I'm not just building widgets, right? There's a standard of care that applies. So yeah, it was really just an interesting journey. And I think I mentioned this to you before, but it sounds serendipitous, right? Like I started my first year, I made my first year salary that I got, I interviewed other places, I got offers.
Yeah.
And this is, 2009, I graduated. You know what 2009 was? It was the armpit of the legal market. This is post-credit. Yeah, post-credit market, crash. Nobody's hiring other than in bankruptcy and creditors' rights. I'm like, I don't want to do that crap. That's like super boring. I'll fall asleep at my desk. I can't fake it. Like I can't. I've got to be into it. And I got to love what I'm doing and wear a smile. That's just me.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm going to represent entrepreneurs. That's my business. I'm going to do internet law, business law, representing the small guy. And so my first year, I made like $75,000 gross, right, or net. So I was like, hey, I think I might be able to pull this off. And at that point, it just multiplied after that. Second year, third year, fourth year. By my second year, after my second year, I was a partner in a bigger law firm, about 10 lawyers at the time. All of whom were my mentors. These are the guys I was calling the year I graduated. I had a personal connection and I said, listen, I need help. So they knew my practice. So they kind of brought me in as a young Jedi, right? And trained me in the swamps of practicing law. And 2.5 years later, I just was like, I'm not a good fit here because I feel like I am of a different mindset. And so I said ciao to them and I joined my colleagues of where I am now. And one of my partners, left. And so it's a 2-partner law firm. And so my partner, Dan, and I, it's been almost 6 years now of us together. And we're killing it. We're loving it. We're enjoying it. We have a niche. Yeah. Our niche is internet law.
Yes.
And so I look forward to meeting every client and answering every question. And it's a passion. I really enjoy it. Our clients come from all over the world, all over the country. And so it's a lot of fun to sort of build it. And now we're at the point where we're trying to scale. And that's the part where it makes you a little nervous because you spend a lot of time and money on these things. But that's the part of being an entrepreneur that I love.
So cool. Well, and I love that you are an entrepreneur. As a fellow entrepreneur, I mean, looking for, you know, if I were to look for a lawyer, I would want someone that understands me. And so I think the fact that you are yourself an entrepreneur,
and that's kind of your niche,
is so helpful. So something that you mentioned too at the end is that you kind of specialize in business law and internet law. So can you kind of dissect the difference between those two types of practices and like what those entail?
Yeah, between internet law and business.
Yes.
Business law. Yeah, absolutely. So, internet law. Let's start with internet law. Internet law is by far the sexier of the two.
So cool.
Yeah, it's every case is a little bit different, but it's a wide playing field. Or maybe I should say it's not very wide, but it's very deep. Mm-hmm. And so with internet law, you have a few different areas. So one is our internet defamation practice, which is what we're known for nationally. So R.M. Warner, my firm, we litigate plaintiffs' defamation cases. Sometimes we'll take defense cases, but these are the cases where you know, we find somebody or somebody finds us who has been completely just obliterated online. The reputation is going down the tubes. False information is being circulated about them, and they need a way to stop this and perhaps seek some recourse. Either that's financial damages or it's getting the statements taken down. Frequently now it bleeds into social media. Once upon a time it used to just be Facebook. Now there's probably thousands of websites, right? Or people create their own websites. If I want to bash Sam, right, I buy her domain name. Right, I would never do that. But you know, they buy I mean, people are crazy. Like, you know what's the worst defendant to have as a plaintiff's internet defamation lawyer?
Tell me,
is
what's it?
Somebody with a little bit of know-how or a lot of know-how who's just batshit crazy. Like, those guys are dangerous.
Totally.
And we've had to deal with those personalities. And so anyway, that side of our practice is taking off. It's growing. It's a national practice. So that's internet defamation. It includes, you know, false reviews that are significant enough to warrant a lawyer to get involved, or anonymous postings that are harassing in nature, or maybe publishing private facts. So I had a case recently where a girl was posted on Pornhub, you know, the #1 pornography site, and she's like, I am, you know, by her ex, and she was just overwhelmed, like she's shutting down. Yeah, it's completely the worst thing that could happen to an individual. And we were able to get it and take it down. We would figure out who it was, and crawling into those spaces of figuring out who's doing what is really difficult. There's a lot of issues with First Amendment law, and judges are skeptical. But anyway, that's the internet defamation side on the plaintiff side, where we litigate those cases. But we also have the e-commerce side of internet law. Mm-hmm. And the e-commerce side is really amazing. It's exactly what it sounds like, representing people who want to start a marketplace online. Or, for example, influencers is another big area of ours that's kind of growing slowly. But we have inquiries from people who have a brand, such as you, or other people who are basically looking to monetize content, or be an affiliate of somebody else's brand. And they want to figure out, how do I protect myself legally? Like, what do I do? And we can walk them through the nuts and bolts of the whole process, get them set up, form their company, get their terms set up, protect them legally, and help them to start generating revenue. The other side of our practice is, that's kind of the internet law, the e-commerce, the defamation, helping people establish their online business. We have a number of online software and online telemedicine clients. But anyway, the business side is interesting. The business side is the early stage company, and all the way through growth and eventual sale. So we kind of have a pipeline. So you come to us, you know, you work with us, we set up your company. If you have partners, we set up, you know, your partnership agreements. We help you protect your intellectual property. And then we sort of exist through the life cycle of your business. If you grow, well, we're going to make sure you have your vendor contracts in place. We're going to make sure you have the right insurance. We're going to make sure that things are scaling appropriately from the legal side. And then eventually, hopefully your objective might be for you, Sam, is, hey, I want to sell. I want to have a payday. I want to retire, or I want to move on to project #2. and we can facilitate that. We do sales, acquisitions, and those kinds of things. And unfortunately, partnership disputes. I've got a lot of experience in that, where it's significant enough that people will spend millions of dollars in litigation when a simple solution existed that they just either overlooked or didn't care to button up. So that's my practice in a nutshell.
So cool. And like the facets of your practice is honestly exactly what I am looking for as a small business owner, and so many of my listeners as well. So I'm so glad that I stumbled upon you. So kind of going into still like what we were talking about with partnership situations, I guess. I found you through social media, so on Instagram, because of the Call Her Daddy drama. So for those that are not familiar with Call Her Daddy, it's a podcast. It's owned by Barstool Sports, and there were two hosts, and they were best friends, and they're hilarious. They were so funny, great banter, and they were blowing up. And essentially back in April of this year, they had a huge dispute over the podcast, and it was kind of building up over time. But something that I love that you did, and this is why I wanted you on the podcast I wanted you on the podcast for so many reasons, but this like introduced me to you. But you created a series of graphics that broke down the Call Her Daddy drama and like what it looked like from a legal standpoint. So I'd love to kind of talk about that. So with the Call Her Daddy drama, what did that look like legally for you?
Yeah, the Call Her Daddy drama was actually a really interesting story. I hate when these kind of things happen, but in a way, it's a great learning tool for everybody.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I think to break it down, I mean, you know the personalities, and I think your viewers do. Alex Cooper, who's the one who's still carrying the torch, if you will, of the Call Her Daddy podcast. Sophia Franklin, who just launched Sophia with an F, which I thought was a hilarious name.
Yeah. Love it. Well done.
And Barstool, which is run by David Portnoy. And then, this ancillary figure, Suitman, who is Sophia's, I don't know if they're still dating, but at the time, boyfriend, who's an ex ESPN or HBO executive.
Yeah.
And so, when we zoom out and we look at it at a 30,000-foot level, Sam, what I see as a person who didn't regularly follow the podcast and the personalities, I drew into it purely from the legal dispute, and I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah.
But when you look at it at a 30,000-foot view, you have a business dispute between two partners who were working with their, in-house or single largest client, who got greedy and didn't have the formalities to back up and support the direction they wanted to go.
Gotcha.
That's just plain and simple. Now, it's very easy for me as a lawyer to criticize and pick this apart after the fact. But that's why these things are good learning tools.
Yeah.
Right. And so, anyways, what happens, as you know, is, they have a first-year contract with Barstools of $75,000 as paid employees. So they're W-2 employees of Barstool, publications, whatever the name of the entity is. And David Portnoy is a successful media guy. I mean, he's been around for 15 years as an online publisher, $200 million company, not small, one of the top media publishers online by traffic data, right? So anyway, they have a great gig. I think Sophia and Alex were just two gals tooling around with podcasts initially, right? They were just talking about salacious topics, which everybody loves controversy.
Totally.
Right?
Hence why we're talking about this. Yeah.
Right. So they're talking about these salacious things, the topics that other people kind of shy away from. They start building a following. And at some point, they connect with Barstool and they ink a contract, right? That's the nutshell of it. But they're W-2 employees. So they're working for Barstool. I think the first year salary it came out was like $75,000 for each of them. Next year went up to $85,000. And then the third year is supposed to be $95,000, I think, with an opportunity for bonus. But the first year, as we understand it, they were already making more than their promised salary. And what I want everybody to know, at least when I look at it, being a person who does content as well in a very small firm like mine, it's not easy creating content.
No.
It's not easy publishing content. You know, you're taking a risk, regardless of how big your company is. They're getting paid a salary to talk for an hour or two on a weekly basis. I mean, think about that. They're not going 9 to 5, punching a clock or answering to a manager. They have essentially free creative reign. So for a lot of people, that's like a dream job. I mean, imagine that.
Yeah.
Right? I'll take, you pay me an hour a week, you know, 52 hours, and I get $75,000 a year. I'll do that deal.
Yeah. Well,
right?
100%. Yeah.
So this is where the mindset and mentality of an entrepreneur needs to be stable. And I always say this, as an entrepreneur, you need to be emotionally stable. You need to be emotionally resilient. And you need to know when to pull the plug and move on, or when to stick and grit it out.
Yeah.
And I think this is the number one mistake Sophia made. So anyway, going back to the story, I don't know what year they were in. I think it was was it a 2-year run? Were they around for 2 years?
They're going on their 3rd year. I think they like just finished their 2nd. I think. Yeah.
So these ladies finish, you know, 2 years of Call Her Daddy. Great following. You know, now they have products, they have branding. You know, there's all these sayings like the gluck gluck. Like, I don't even know all this stuff. Like, there's all this stuff, and there's merch, and you know, just tons of traffic. And Sophia got greedy, or as Alex would say, her boyfriend, who's sort of a wannabe agent, got greedy, and he kind of was like, oh, maybe I can shop these guys around. You guys are worth way more than that. This is the rooftop conversation, right? That eventually happens, that blows this whole thing up. And so, you know, here's how I look at it. Your worth as a content creator is determined by your following. It's determined by, you know, what the brands, what they throw at you.
Uh-huh.
And so just because you have early success doesn't necessarily mean you have a right to demand more money. And I like to make a sports analogy. LeBron James, first year in the NBA, dude's making $4 million a year.
Okay.
Is that a lot of money? It's a lot of money if you're 16, 17, 18, 19. $4 million a year to do what you love. Again, I'd take that deal. I think you would too. Most people would.
Yes.
The dude's getting paid $150 million for his multi-year contract now, right? And now that they won another championship, probably commands more. But look where he started. And the key thing was that he stuck around, and he got the brand deals. And of course he had agents, and of course he had to negotiate. But I use that analogy because Barstool is a brand. Call Her Daddy is a brand. Mm-hmm. And if you, as an influencer, as a social media content creator, as a podcast person, want to command the highest value, and you work for somebody, then you have to prove your worth. You don't just come out and say, I'm worth this because I know you're making millions of dollars off of me. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work like that.
Oh, that's so true.
And so, unfortunately, Sophia said, I'm going to try to shop this behind Barstool's back. And contrary to her friend Alex's desires, Alex maintains that she didn't know that this was being shopped around, or that they were going to try to pitch Barstool for more pay, because it turns out Alex actually was willing to run with this and loved the show, loved working with Barstool. And so the details of what happens are kind of fuzzy. Personally, I think Suitman blew this whole thing. Yeah. I think, you know, David Portnoy, if you've ever watched, you probably have his videos, his Instagram posts on the whole ordeal. He was pissed. He was like, these guys are backstabbers. He actually used it plurally, which is interesting because Alex still works for him. But
I think like Alex was like on board with shopping it, and then they offered them such a good deal, and she's like, wait, we should just take this deal. And then Sophia was like, no, we're still gonna shop it. So she did kind of go backstabbing, and then came back around and was like, oops, sorry, I'm back.
And that's the tough part about this, is you have somebody who's your friend and your business partner who wants to go a different direction financially and try to make more money. And the complaints were pretty serious, right? Sophia's allegation was, look, I'm working 80 hours a week or whatever it was, editing. I'm constantly editing. I'm not making what I believe I'm putting in, which again, you're a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
De facto, by law, you're a partnership because you're working together in a common joint venture, and you're sharing profits. It just happens to be in a form of royalties or bonus structures. But yeah, I wish the facts would have been different. It would have been interesting if she stuck around, or she said, "Hey, Alex, you're right. Let me not be greedy. Let me just focus on building a better brand and running with this." I wish she would have done that. Now, I can't say that she regrets it. As you know, she's got her own podcast. I don't know if she regrets it. But me, as an outsider looking into it, I think she was foolish.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. And I think for me, this is the reason why I keep bringing this call her daddy subject up, is because by no means was I to this caliber, but I have lost friendships over business partnerships. And it is, there's nothing worse. There's nothing worse. And it totally could have been avoided. And so for those listening, what would be your recommendation if, for say, they're going into business with their friend or even just with a partner in general? Like, what are those things that they should be aware of beforehand just to protect everyone?
So there's a lot.
Yeah.
But I would say that let's start at a high level and kind of work down from there. At a high level, you have to think friendship is friendship.
Yeah.
Business is business. Very easy to say, but the reason why people don't like lawyers, just to get to the nitty gritty, is we don't care about that fact.
Yeah.
The fact that you're friends, the fact that you're friends is a risk factor. When people come to me like, hey, this is my best friend of 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and if I represent that person, individual, and they're telling me about their friend, I'm like, honey, you got problems.
Don't do it. Yep.
and I may not tell them don't do it, but what I tell them, and I have friends who I've counseled, other lawyers. I've represented other lawyers in putting together partnerships and law firms and real estate companies. But the end of the day, it's a formality. Business is formal. And you have to observe the formalities if you want to get out of it what you're putting in the sense that if you want the protection. And it's like, I can drive down the street without my seatbelt, without insurance, without checking the gas tank, without checking the tires, and say, I'm the best driver ever. I don't care about everybody else. Not realizing that there's all these variables. There's the car, there's the weather, there are other drivers. Driving is pretty dangerous. But people pay more attention to maybe putting the buckle on, getting into a car than they do putting a buckle on in a business that potentially could create liability for them, but also generate a lot of revenue and a lot of risk, particularly with partners. So the number one principle is observe the formalities. So what are those formalities, right? So the first thing I look at when somebody comes to me is, look, did you form a company already? If so, where did you form? And because my practice space is, I have clients from everywhere, all across the country, all across the world, we usually have to do an analysis, like what makes the most sense. And sometimes we're not tax advisors, but frequently we have to ask our clients to get the advice of a CPA so that there are minimal tax consequences. And so, we look at what state makes sense for you to form in. It's not always Delaware. Sometimes it's Wyoming. It's rarely Nevada. I hate people that by de facto go to Nevada. That's just a horrible misconception.
If you're not located there, you can go register your business in another state.
Oh, of course, you can register your business anywhere. It's a question of the complexity of or reason. Yeah, 100%.
Really?
Of
wow.
Course, of course,
that's probably like 101, and my mind's blown by that. I did not know.
But that's okay. But the fact that you recognize that you didn't know that's what makes it better, right? If you pretended like, hey, I know this stuff, it's easy. I'll just go to LegalZoom and I'll just get the advice, get counseling, right? Get the right advice. It's like somebody trying to be their own mental therapist.
Yeah. You're
right?
not
That's
always
what
right. You always, and like you said before, like mentorship and having someone that's better at something than you are is going to help you tenfold, 100%.
And all of my clients say this, hey, Raees, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm like, of course you're not a lawyer. Sometimes they are lawyers.
Yeah.
But even the lawyers that come to me, they're like, hey, Raees, this is not in my wheelhouse. Like, I don't feel comfortable with this. And I love when people say that, because that's the equivalent of them laying down on the sofa at the psych office, at the shrink's office, and saying, tell me your problems. That's the equivalent of that. They've submitted their vulnerability to you.
Mm-hmm.
And you as a lawyer, then now it's your job to say, all right, let's look at, for example, why is it important to form in Arizona or Utah or Delaware? Then you make a recommendation. Okay, Sam, you've got a business partner. What are your expectations with your business partner? Are you cool doing the grunt work and your partner taking 50% because they're capitalizing the business? You might be cool with that. Here's the pros and cons. And I have a whole process that I push my clients through when they're forming new businesses. And so that is, again, a formality. It's a process. You don't just get a form because it was cheap,
Mm-hmm.
sign the form, have no idea what you signed up for, and then hope and pray that business is great.
Oh. Been there,
right?
done that. So yeah, I'm glad you're bringing that up.
Yeah, and so that's the other second formality is, okay, you formed your company. Now what partnership or governance documents you need? And if you're a solo, fine. You probably are not doing business alone in the sense that you have vendors that you work with, or that you work with mentors, or maybe you have an advisory board. What do those relationships look like? Let's document that. I can't tell you how many early stage companies come to me that have promised equity to people, and some of those promises, verbal promises, are legally enforceable. And if they're legally enforceable and you thought they weren't, you have a problem, because now your expectations aren't the same. Same thing with Sophia and Liz, just to use her as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Sophia and Alex, if they were smart, they would have entered into an agreement with each other.
Yes.
There's actually a clause called a no shop clause. It's used in business sales all the time. Hey, you will not shop this around. And granted, maybe Barstool had a clause like that. We don't know, because their contracts, I don't think, are public.
Okay.
But those are terms that you can enter in. So if you hire your own content developer, Sam, and you said, look, I don't have time. I'm managing. I'm doing the back end technical marketing stuff. I want somebody who's going to do all of my editing, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to give them. You might be perfectly fine with them having 10 other jobs on this, as long as that's the expectation. But how are they delivering it, right? Are they delivering on a particular date? Is there a particular format? These are things that people don't necessarily think through unless you're hiring a lawyer to think through these issues, right? So like with influencers, number one problem with influencers, FTC regulatory problems, number one. Number two, when they do these brand deals, they just sign the contract that they're given. And I've seen plenty of contracts. I'm looking at them like, did you know that you gave up all of your posts? You have to take your posts down. Oh, I didn't. That's not fair. It doesn't matter if it's fair or not. You signed the agreement.
Oh my gosh. Oh, so
yeah.
this is
So
the stuff that keeps me up at night, because I'm like, wait, what if I do something wrong? I don't know. It's so scary.
Well, and that's the thing. Another great Call Her Daddy example. If you were Sophia and you believed that you owned your content just because you were the creator, a lawyer would tell you, actually, you were an employee, and what you created within the scope of your employment is owned by your employer. So see you later. You can't use any of the stuff you did for Call Her Daddy.
Wow. Crazy.
So yeah, so just those kind of formalities, making sure if you're in business with somebody, whether they're a buyer, a seller, a brand, or an influencer you're hiring, get somebody who knows what they're doing. Get somebody a lawyer who's competent. And my fees are flexible. I understand there are people who are afraid, like going to a lawyer is worse than going to a dentist, because they're not sure what's going down the hatch. I don't know, but find somebody you trust, get a referral, do your internet diligence, and it always pays off.
Yeah,
it always pays off to have formality up front.
I think that's so smart. I love that, and I think that's great advice. And yeah, if anyone's looking for anything like that, that's something you guys offer too. So check them out for sure. Okay, so I have a couple other questions that I selfishly want to know. So when it comes to LLCs or creating registering your business, I just learned that you can register in other states. Very cool. But I had a friend, she had been in business for like 5 years, like for a while. And she told me, and I'm not going to say who this is because I don't want her to get in trouble or anything, but it sparked this question. But she told me that she had just gotten an LLC this year, and she's been doing business for so long. So for me, I just like, my natural instinct is if I'm starting a business, I go register it and then we go from there. So from a legal standpoint, what is the importance of registering your business and versus just kind of doing under the table?
Under the table is not an option.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it. No,
Yeah.
the cost of creating a company and the protection and upside you get is, you can't even compare that to the benefit, right? So the cost versus benefit is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So there are other reasons, right? So number one, liability protection.
Mm-hmm.
You have to distinguish yourself, the individual, the family person, maybe you're a teacher full-time or maybe whatever you do, compared to your business side of who you are, right? And when you create that legal entity separation, you've distinguished your assets and liabilities from one another. So, perfect example, you do business as Sam and you enter into agreements as Sam, or some people think if you do a DBA, it's some kind of protection, you create a fictitious name. At the end of the day, if you breach that contract, they're coming after Sam personally and all of Sam's personal assets, her house, her bank accounts, her jewelry, whatever. You're a target. That's not something that should make you sleep well at night.
Yeah, no,
and,
terrifying.
Right? And so the solution is create a company. Now, which company, where, and all that makes a difference. The other thing is you can't raise capital if you're just a solo person selling widgets on the side.
Yeah.
The other issue is you can't add partners, right? You can't sell if you're an individual. Technically, I suppose you could sell assets if you required physical inventory, but there's so many reasons why you'd create a company that it makes more sense. So hopefully your friend has at least maybe talked to a lawyer who can say, look, like what I would be concerned about if I were her or anybody who's done business and then creates an entity is, what is my exposure?
Mm-hmm.
And is there anything I can do to limit the exposure? Should I go and execute documents with my prior vendors to clean that up? What are the kinds of things should I be thinking about? That's where my head would be at if I was this person.
Totally. I think that's great advice. I think I have a lot of people a lot of followers or listeners who, like I said, are entrepreneurs, and it's like a lot of people don't know like business 101, which is totally fine. Like we talked about before, like we want someone to tell, like it's good to have mentors. We can't know everything. So I think that's such great advice. And I think kind of segueing into this next question, so for, small business owners, what would be, obviously every business is different, but if you could list off like a couple checkpoints that, small business owners could protect themselves legally, they just need to make sure they have these few things and they should be pretty protected overall. Like what would those things be? Yeah,
any particular industry? Like maybe influencer or content creator or?
Let's say, influencer. That's a good one. I like that.
So if you're an influencer, we actually have a checklist, and I'm happy, and actually remind me, Sam, I'm happy to share with you an FTC guide little graphic that we created for you and your users and your listeners can reference it for free. But if you're an influencer, the first thing that I'm thinking is create a business entity.
Okay.
Create a brand. If you're building a brand, talk to a lawyer and form a company. Okay, that's the separation between you individually and the assets and liabilities of the individual and the assets and liabilities of the company. You want to have a company to have a brand. You want the company to own everything. So that's number one. Regardless of how big or small, you might be making $500 a post or $100 a post. Doesn't matter. Do it.
Make a business.
Number one, right?
Would they be considered like an LLC as an influencer or a sole proprietor?
Right. So if you don't have an entity, you're a sole proprietor.
Okay. So
if you form an entity.
Okay.
Yeah. If you form an entity, you're an LLC, or you could be a corporation. There are other types of entities that usually don't apply, like limited partnerships and limited liability partnerships. But to keep it simple, you've got a corporation or you've got an LLC. You can make different tax elections in an LLC, which is more tax stuff. But LLCs are very easy. Most states, there's zero maintenance. They tend to be the entity of choice. But there are reasons why you might form a corporation versus an LLC. So number one is form the entity. Number two is don't sign a brand contract without talking to a lawyer. I don't expect anybody to know the difference between a work made for hire or understanding of licensing of IP, the scope of the license, what the royalty or payment is actually being paid for, or what your termination rights are. Even though they're written on paper, it's what's not on paper, which is most important. I've actually heard people tell me this, Raees, I don't want to pay you your hourly rate to read a document that I can read. And so you know what my answer is? What about the thousands of pages that you haven't read?
So true, so true. And I feel like you understand it on a different level. Like you can read through it and try to like dissect it, but I still think, again, going back to working with people that know more than you do, like rely on an expert. Have that expert like regurgitate that to you, that information, in a way that you're going to understand even better. So I love that.
100% right. So so form the company. Before you sign a contract, whether it's an energy drink company, and I've seen some of these energy drink company contracts, and they're very disappointing. You know, I wouldn't have my clients sign them off the bat, especially the non-competes. That's a common issue. So I had a client come to me, several in the last year, like, hey, I just realized I signed this contract. I didn't realize it. I would have called you earlier. I'm like, how do you not realize you signed something? Anyway, I have a non-compete. And so we look at it, and unfortunately in their state, it is enforceable. And unfortunately, they're restricted for that period of time for that particular service or product from going to a competitive product. Imagine if you were an influencer that just did like diet products.
Yeah.
You might not be able to engage with another brand because of that for a period of 6 months or 3 months or a year.
Oh my gosh.
And it's happened. So contract. Somebody with experience in these kinds of contracts. The next formality is, and this is not necessarily like sequential, I would do these in parallel, and that is get the regulatory advice. So major brands have been hit by the Federal Trade Commission, which is a US agency responsible for enforcing the Federal Trade Act, which is a consumer protection federal statute. So the FTC is actively scouring social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, for people who are falsely advertising, but also people who are not making the proper disclosures. Is that
when they do like hashtag ad, or they're saying like partnership with? So this is for those that are saying they're doing these things, but they actually aren't in partnership with them, and or people that are in partnership with them that aren't disclosing enough information to say so.
Correct. And it's usually the latter that's more concerning, right? It's usually if you're getting, this is like the 2020 version of back in the day, people used to pay people or give them free goods to do favorable reviews. That's also, believe it or not, an FTC problem. You have to disclose that. Yeah. Okay. So if you were given a gift to review a product, you have to state, like if I say, oh, Dasani makes the best water. I really enjoy drinking their water. It's clear, it tastes good. I love the mineral content. All of which is true. I would still need to say if Dasani sent this bottle to me for free, asking me to review it.
Oh, okay. Oh my gosh. It's stuff like that people don't even know. Yeah, that's amazing.
You have to, and again, we don't expect people to just know this, that these laws exist. You have to disclose a material connection. Are you related to the person whose product or service you're offering or promoting? Have you told them that you're a brand ambassador or that a paid partner? And that not only that, but now they're even getting more specific. So you can't just flash the hashtag once if it's a video. Like we're doing this Instagram video. If you were a brand ambassador and you were promoting a product, you couldn't just say it once in the beginning. You actually have to have it as a sticky tag somewhere in the video or description so people can see it continuously. Because if I miss it, I won't know for the rest of the audio or video. So these are important things, easy to look over. Major brands have been hit. The fines are staggering. They're usually in the millions because it's a per incident, per violation. So every time it's broadcast, or it's just easy to rack up FTC fines.
Is
but
that
it's a
something that
no-brainer.
would be fined to the influencer or the company they're partnered with?
Both.
Oh, okay.
Both have a duty to comply. Now, if you are, let's say, we'll use the water bottle example, not water body. And I'm like, hey, Sam, I own this company. I'm going to just give this to you. You have a great following. They live in the desert area in Utah and Arizona, and they love to go hiking. And I'm a water guy. So every time you talk about my water, I'm going to send you a free case of water, and I'm going to pay you $500, right? When I document our agreement, I have a duty to tell you that you need to do this. And technically, I should make sure that you are complying with it, and I should actually enforce it. So I should audit it regularly. But you certainly, as the influencer, you can't rely and say, well, Dasani is such a gigantic brand. They would tell me if I'm doing something wrong. No, it doesn't work like that. You individually have the responsibility. The company has its own responsibility. So all the players in this have a duty. And that's why it's so easy to come down and just whack people with these fines.
Oh my gosh. And it's so important to have your entity set up too as an influencer, or, as a business too, reaching out to influencers, you to make sure, you're staying on it, making sure they're complying, because exactly, it can find both of you. That's so crazy. I did not know that.
One of the things, just while it's fresh in my mind, we talk about content creation, and usually there's more than one person involved in creating content nowadays with influencers. There's somebody's shooting it. It's not one person with the cell phone. Rarely is that the case anymore with people with intense followings, but sometimes it is. But somebody else may own the right to your content, either jointly or entirely. And you see this problem with celebrities who get their picture taken and then use the picture. And then the paparazzi or photographer sues them and saying I'm the author under the Copyright Act, which is true. I took the picture. You need to pay me.
Yeah.
Same thing applies to influencers.
What about this? So, sorry to cut you off. So I've been working with a company who they have a team member who is she's been involved with the media, like publications, for years and years and years. And she is very conscious of like using people's likeness. So, for example, a big trend on social media right now is creating memes of TV shows, movies, celebrities. How is that illegal? What is the difference between their likeness versus the person who took the photo or created the content? Who owns that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So this is a little complicated because it's very nuanced. The short answer is this. If you're a celebrity, you have the right to preclude people from using your likeness in association with a commercial venture, like advertising a product, advertising a service. And you see these lawsuits all the time where a celebrity is like Dr. Oz's pictures being used all over with people who are marketing this green coffee extract supplements. I'm like, dude, show me your agreement with Dr. Oz where he licenses this to you. Oh no, he's talked about it on his show. I'm like, that doesn't give you the right to use his face in the ad or on your website. You can't do that. Right? So celebrities get the right to preclude, their likeness has value. We recognize that in society. So you can't just go and start willy-nilly using their likeness for a commercial purpose. Now, there's exceptions. An exception would be if you are talking about something that's newsworthy. So if you look at our Instagram page, RM Warner, you'll see all these posts with celebrity pictures. Like, well, Raees, aren't you doing that? No, because we're publishing information and news, something that's newsworthy. We're not promoting a brand, even though it's on our Instagram page. You say, isn't that promoting a brand? No, because we're not saying The Rock, Dwayne Johnson uses RM Warner Law. We've never said, right? So there's a difference between that. Now with lay people, you have a right to let's say if you took a picture. This is the common scenario. You took a picture, and you're the photographer. You are the owner of that picture, regardless of who's on the other end of that picture.
Okay.
Okay. The author's this is a copyright law principle. The author is the person who fixed or established the artistic rendering, in which case would be the photographer. So you as an influencer, did you get in writing from the photographer that, hey, you're doing this as a work made for hire, you're assigning it to me, I own it, so that you can then take it and use it? Some photographers don't even know about this. Usually photographers just say, hey, just give me credit, like just put my name or my hashtag or But reality is photographers could be going buck wild saying, you're doing this massive campaign, you've got 1 million followers. I never gave you permission to use this. I just took the picture. That's two separate things.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is something. I mean, I even think about like, you know, Instagram in 2016, and it was all just like, you know, verbal contracts with each other, like, hey, just tag me, you're totally fine. You never know, like, what if, you know, now in this day and age where social media keeps exploding and exploding, make sure that you have your ducks in a row, because you never know if someone's gonna go batshit crazy. You don't know those people, right? You never know. So
Doing business on the internet through social media, on social media, is all about mitigating risk and taking steps to protect your brand. I mean, there's a whole side of this conversation that we didn't talk about, which we'll have to save to another day, which is protecting your reputation online and like things you can do to mitigate if somebody starts going on a rampage to damage your reputation. There are things you can do as preventive measures. And but anyway, you have to be sophisticated, but I don't expect people to know the law. Being sophisticated means you say, I went and hired a lawyer who knows what he's doing or what she's doing and gave me great advice and protected me. That's what you should be doing.
I think that's such great advice. Well, okay, we could literally, I have so many questions for you. I could have you for hours, truly. So yes, we should definitely do this again. But for those listening or tuning in on this live, where can they find you on social? How can they get in touch with you? And are you guys taking new clients?
Yes. So yes to all the above. On Instagram, you know, our handle on all social media is pretty much the same. It's RM Warner Law. RM, my initials, Warner Law. Follow us, send us messages. I have a marketing person who is checking and responding to those. You should also visit our website, rmwarnerlaw.com. We actually have a blog where we give substantive information on stuff that I'm talking about. And then for your listeners, we're happy to send them this FTC disclosure. I can send it to them, or if they contact us, we're happy to give it to them as well.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing. Thank you so much for that. And you guys, go follow them. Follow them on Instagram. Follow them wherever you can. I love your guys' content. That's another thing. We could have a whole other conversation about how well you guys execute your social media channels, because it's so engaging and informative.
We're really just getting started. It's really in nascent stages, but I think we do an okay job with the content. Thank you, though. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I told you this before, but I use your guys' account as an example in my social media trainings as like a great example of taking a industry that maybe you would normally follow on social media and making it really fun and like you want to follow, you're excited for their posts. So kudos, you guys. Go follow RM Warner Law on Instagram, find them on all social media channels. And then, yeah, thank you again for joining me. This was so informative.
My pleasure. We'll do this again sometime.
Yes, would love that. Okay, have a good day.
Awesome. Thank you.